For those coming in late, I am going to be taking questions. In fact, I'm going to be depending on them. So if you think you might have questions, please sit where you can reach the audience mic. And do we have a timekeeper? Okay, then I'll just set an alarm for an hour and try and shut up after that if we're still here that long. Okay. That would assume that I can see that far. That would be optimistic. All right, my name is Steve Jackson, and this is a talk on principles of game design. I was told that we might have someone here with a game that they wanted critiqued. That's you? Why don't you come on up and grab one of the other mics, and we'll start by putting you on the spot. Bring whatever you want me to look at, or if there's nothing, just tell me about it.
So is this on? Yeah.
Seems to be.
So I was told not to prepare anything. So I'm just going to tell you what the game is and then have you rip it apart and tell me where I can think about it better.
Okay, well, we have to find out who told you not to prepare anything and have them hanged in public on pay TV, but that'll break the con even for sure. But other than that, sure. Introduce yourself.
So, hi, I'm Alex. I work in video games, but in 2020, early in the pandemic, I decided to try and go and make, figure out, hey, here's a cool board game design that I think my board game group and I would like to play. So that's kind of where I'm coming at this from. So the idea was I wanted to make a deck builder in the vein of a Dominion or Ascension.
Right. Let's take a second. Is everybody a little bit familiar with the game Dominion? No. Okay. Is anybody not familiar with the idea of deck builders in general? Everybody admits to knowing what he's talking about so far. That's a win. Okay. Please continue, Alex.
Yeah. So the idea was I wanted to make a deck builder like that, but it was a co-op game. That everyone.
That's a strange combo.
Because I very much enjoy deck builders, but the group I play with regularly are, we really like co-op games.
Okay. Well, when I said it was a strange combo, that was a compliment, not a criticism. Finding new things to mash up is part of the game.
Yeah. And so I made a paper prototype. I looked for it yesterday and I couldn't find it, so it's in a box somewhere. But the basic idea is that you are all brand new recruits from legally distinct from Starfleet. So sci-fi theme. You're on your first mission.
Are we red shirts?
You are not red shirts. You are across various disciplines.
Okay.
You are brand new, ensigns, the next generation of command, and the game starts when all of the senior staff disappear in a flash of light.
I hate it when they do that.
Reliably enough. And so you, the new fresh recruits, have to build up your decks, which is equivalent of gaining skills and knowledge of how to go run the ship and get back to safety.
Is it all or nothing as far as the players go?
Yes, you either all succeed and get back to safety, or you do not succeed at some point. You get so many jumps along your journey, and then finally succumb to the various challenges.
Okay.
So the neat idea here, the idea that makes the co-op and the deck building work, is that when the core idea behind a lot of deck building games is you're basically building your own engines. So you have your own deck that has all the various cards that you've put in it. You draw up a certain number from your deck, and you play them out. And the idea is you want things to work together as synergies. At least, that's the perspective, the takeaway I've learned from other deck building games.
If I can interrupt,
Please.
if it's a co-op deck builder, then you also want synergies with your, I don't want to say opponents, with the decks of the other players, right?
With your teammates.
Okay.
And the idea to tie that in is that on my turn, when I'm trying to do something, other players can discard cards from their hand to power my abilities for resources I am missing.
Right.
And sometimes a challenge will require one of my teammates to provide that resource that even if I have the 3 science from my hand to play to use one of my abilities, it has a little icon on it that says one of your other teammates has to supply this.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, even on my turn, I'm trying to get everyone involved, which sounds, like a great idea. In practice, the twice I've tried to playtest this, it winds up just being, hey, everyone, lay all your cards out and let's try and plan the next cycle around the board.
Right. A friend of mine likes co-op games, but the way she likes to play them is to turn all the other players into her sock puppets and play their hands.
Mhm.
And that's not as much fun.
It is definitely not as much fun, and I felt like, so the way, just the history of it is, I created some number of cards on good old index cards, and had people play it via webcam, and it felt a lot like, okay, well, the two of us who are really engaged here are kind of trying to plan everyone else's out. This is something I know is an issue, like whenever I've played Pandemic with people.
Yes.
Other co-op games I've played where it just becomes, okay, so everyone is, we're all going for a common goal. There's nothing between us, so that it feels like everyone is just trying to optimize jointly, and that winds up being whoever is best at that particular task winds up doing the optimization.
And yet Pandemic is a bestseller. People are having fun.
That's true. I hadn't thought about it like that. So the second playtest went about the same, except it now had all of these new little more nuanced mechanics to try and make that less of an issue, which just felt too complicated. The amount of stuff I was having everyone have to think about just felt like it had ballooned.
So analysis paralysis?
Um, a lot of it was more bookkeeping.
Okay.
Just, oh, hey, we forgot about that rule. Oops. There's one edge case rule that's supposed to force you to, on your turn, you can only take, one action and one move, and you can sacrifice a health point for a second move because you've got, your little, the ship has a diagram, and as you fail challenges or random events happen, the threats the ship faces, you roll a dice and you put, oh, this hallway is now damaged.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were in the hallway, you take a point of damage. And whenever you run out of hearts, oh, you're incapacitated, and you basically skip your turn. It's just kind of an escalating difficulty thing. And the way that got is just, oh, I forgot, that if I use this device, I can do 2 actions instead, or because I have this card in play. And it just felt like it got too complicated trying to make it so that everybody's decisions on their own turn were more engaging, that they had more control of themselves, so it didn't feel like that one person's masterminding everyone else at the table.
Did you find a solution, or is that just where you left it?
That's about where I left it. I had a change in work then, so it got put in a box, and this was my opportunity to bring it back out to ask for some advice on, how someone with as much board game experience as you would think about these problems.
Okay, well, as a group, we can consider this a co op game and try to think about it. Does anybody have any immediate questions or comments, especially questions if you want clarification of what Alex has been explaining? Yes.
I think you kind of glossed over it, but you mentioned that one of the problems is someone basically takes over the game and starts instructing everybody. Couldn't you just layer on mechanics that kind of deters that kind of mindset?
So that's what I did for the second playtest. I added more rules about like the person, where they move and what they do on their turn, and the risk that they as an individual player would take from being in, the ship is a map. And it wound up adding in a lot of like rules that only applied in some cases that were easy to forget. So I didn't the at least the thing I attempted for that didn't feel like it pushed the game to be better. I'm not saying there's not ways that that could work, but the thing I tried definitely felt like it was just adding complexity that was not fun.
Yeah. A principle to keep in mind is unnecessary complexity is evil. But the only way to find out if it's unnecessary or fun is what you started to do, which is play test it. Terraforming Mars is incredibly complex, but it must be fun because I keep playing it. Yes.
What about something like players that aren't physically in the same space on the board can't communicate? They can't show each other their hands. They can't talk about their hands. And the players that are in the same space have to keep their communication quiet and separate from it. So basically, when you're on your own, you are actually on your own. No one can tell you how to do your job. You have to figure it out because there is no one else in the room with you.
I like the idea of limiting cooperation between players who aren't present. Um, you could sabotage that a little bit by allowing them communicators, but that could be a card that not everybody has, or it could be a system that is itself vulnerable to collapse. Yes, you had
No,
another
no,
thought?
it's just a good idea. Yes.
Okay. I'm not so crazy about telling them they have to keep their voices down because uh, that that's not the way people want to act.
Yeah, it's fair.
Yes.
Have you tried like role assignments?
So the game, similar to Pandemic, everyone has kind of a character, very much themed off of what Legally Distinct from Star Trek would have. You have the warfare officer, you have the scientist, the doctor, the pilot, and I think the other role that I made a card for was the transporter.
Might be interesting to have a role dedicated towards communicating, maybe, or making it so that communication is one of the skills that you can pick up, like you pick up a radio or a walkie-talkie that enables you to have certain levels of communication.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the idea of restricting communication as a mechanic. That was a really interesting one, and that would be a way to kind of help work around it. Is you have someone, pick up the communicator. I'm not certain if that's a direction I would want to go though, because at least with my board game group, what we have a lot of fun with is, you know, talking and being boisterous and loud. And even in there's a game I played called Magic Maze, where the biggest rule is that you cannot talk during the game unless you call a timeout, and then there's rules about how many timeouts you get. And that's a lot of fun, but it is, even then you're communicating thoroughly the entire game by pointing and grunting and, like, just like, hey, you're the only person who can move a token, left. We really need this particular token moved left. So I am pointing at it, I am looking you in the eyes, and so that's still a lot of communication.
Right. We've got a question on
Oh.
this side.
Sorry.
I was wondering if you could use a sort of blind draft, like in Magic the Gathering.
Mhm.
You have 15 cards and you pick one, ask the next person. There's a certain theory where you kind of reveal by picking certain colors out of the, or you tell your other opponents that you're in that color pick.
Mhm.
So maybe try having a mechanic where you have certain different cards that tell, like, trying to communicate by picking, by drafting a certain way, maybe.
I'm not quite sure how that connects. That's not saying it's a bad idea. It's saying I don't get it yet.
If it's the type of thing where, like, yes, players cannot communicate, talk to each other at the table, I think that would be really interesting, is trying to figure out based off of what someone else has taken from this set, like, okay, what are they thinking since I think they took this? But that was not a mechanic I had in any of my prototypes.
Well, what about a situation where they can talk all they want, but they cannot play cards to help each other unless they're located together? Now, of course, that will encourage them to all stay in a mass, but if they stay in a mass, they can solve one problem at a time, and the engines can't take it, or something like that.
I think I do think that would be interesting as a mechanic, or especially as like a temporary thing. Like
Mm,
that would really spice it up if, like, oh, we travel to the new destination, okay, well, here's the problem at this destination, and like that was a temporary restriction. I think that for what I was going for, um, that type of, I can only share resources with people at the same tile, would actually kind of make the planning problem even more distinct,
mm.
because then it's like, not only are we, is one person trying to coordinate everyone's plays over the next turn, but they're also now coordinating everyone's movements so that everything can link up. I've definitely had that happen in games of Pandemic.
Have you considered changing it so, while yes, the winner losses, you win as a team or you lose a team, but after you win, everyone has their own score?
I had thought about that, but I had not actually pursued what that would look like. Score to me, like, at least I know a lot of people, and I'm like developing this game with my specific board game group in mind, is not as big a motivator as the win loss. So I wanted something that would have been more granular. That was kind of why I added more on the board, because it's like, oh, well, three of us won. I'm sorry, Kara, your person died, so you lose. Was my thinking there? Is that if everyone else wins, but Kara died along the way, well, Kara doesn't win.
So, can people die now, but it's still considered part of a shared victory? Or does everyone survive until they all die together?
So if you wind up, being in dangerous parts of the ship, your character will lose health, and then you have to go to a med bay to get it back.
Okay.
Is one of the mechanics, and that was more about incapacitating people, like give them reasons to go into a certain part of the ship or not, or more so a reason for, hey, you got to go, you can't just focus on the objective, you got to go fix the ship up too, or this is a consequence of, oh, you didn't succeed with this challenge, it went around the board enough times, you lose the challenge, your reactor blows up, who was ever in the reactor room takes damage. Like, it is a consequence for that, very much playing into the theme.
Right. Well, describe a situation immediately preceding a
Hmm.
loss, if you would. What what pushes it over the edge to we did not make it?
Yeah. So one of the mechanics of the game, which I guess I should have left with its pretty core one, is you have to basically travel 9 times
Mm-hmm.
to get back to safety. And every time you travel, you flip over a card from the challenges deck, the locations deck, and that card will have, hey, here's what this location is. Oh, this is an anomaly. We have to research it, or we can research it, which will give us, upgrades on the ship. And you do that by taking your base power resources and converting them using either cards in hand that you've put into your deck, or in the worst case, spots on the ship that your character's physically at, into processed resources, and then you use those, pay those essentially to solve a layer, a tier of the threat. So hey, we have this black hole that's about to go quasar. That's bad. We don't want to be here when that happens. Well, you have 9 players' turns until that happens. So, you're on a timer and it's ticking down, and we can stay here and research the quasar in order to get upgrades, learn things about the technology. But we also, need to solve the challenge with the gravity before we can leave. And if we're here when it goes quasar, then, you take some points of damage and then you can leave.
Okay, but I don't see yet how to lose the game.
When your ship takes too much damage and you have not repaired enough, your ship explodes. When all players are incapacitated, your ship eventually explodes. Is kind of when
Okay.
everyone's down, you lose. So those are the 2 loss conditions.
So we all go together when we go.
Yes.
Okay. That would be attractive to some groups. I mean, it's about as black and white as you can get. Yes.
For the, I guess, communication thing, what if, like, instead of, like, someone trying to, like, give a whole speech on how the whole, like, next turn is going to go through, like, maybe for, like, if you do, like, communication things, like a PA or a walkie-talkie, you can only speak for, like, an X amount of time before, like, the power runs out, and then you have to, like, resupply the power to the communicator. So that way one person just doesn't go through, like, a 10-minute monologue of how to play everyone else the next turn. Like, you can just, like, have, like, oh, I have, like, 3 minutes to say something, just maybe say that, and then try to find another way to, like, give another talk.
Well, that's I like that. Now the question is your target audience, your player group, were they enjoying what they were seeing in the first couple of games? Were they providing the criticism? Were sock puppeting and so on, or were they having a good time?
They were having an okay time. They were doing it as a favor to me, I think.
Okay.
A lot of the criticism of why I think it wasn't working as well as I hoped is my observation.
Okay.
I don't think they were not having fun, but I think that if I had pulled out any of our regular games and said, "Hey, you guys want to play this instead?" they would have picked one of our old standbys in a heartbeat.
Okay. Well, that's one way to analyze it, but you have the advantage here in a way in that you're doing this for a specific group of people. You know that the feedback is meaningful, and you're not trying to do this for mass market. You're doing it for a group. So tying that idea back to the stated GASP principle of the panel, one of the things that we do in game design is occasionally ask people for written feedback. Have you been formal at all in your requests for feedback from them?
I was not.
You were not. Okay. Well, that's one suggestion. And not all the questions have to be essay questions. It's all right to ask them, would you rather play this again or be slowly tortured to death? That could give you a meaningful response, though I hope not. But get a handle on what they are liking. If all of those responses seem like they're just being polite, yeah, maybe you don't actually want to push this a lot further. But if they seize on some elements of the game that are not present in your regulars and say, I really like this and I wish that Pandemic had more of it, then that's something to emphasize. More comments? Yes.
I mean, I just feel like when you have an open co-op, like you're describing it, communication is just an inherent problem that I feel like competitive co-ops kind of resolve, because then the players have a reason to not disclose everything that they have.
Well, how would your players like it if you added some level of competitiveness? We're all going to get home, or we're not. But if we all get home, some people are going to get commended and promoted, and maybe some aren't.
Oh, that is definitely something I felt I was missing, because I don't think score would have been affected, but one of us gets promoted at the end. That is a much juicier fantasy to sell.
Yes,
I'm sorry, are either of you familiar with Betrayal at the House on the Hill?
I am.
I'm not going to say super familiar. I've shoulder surfed it without playing.
Okay, so an interesting about Betrayal is it starts off as open co-op, but then there's a phase 2 where there could or could not be a player bad guy, essentially, which might add an interesting level of.
One of these ensigns might be legally distinct from a Borg.
So, or one of you may be not quite Q.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's been done, but it's been done repeatedly because it works. The other suggestion I was going to make is that make the ability to communicate effectively quite overtly a resource to be hoarded.
So I know, like, one of the base resources that I have is like commands. The idea that the gold shirt, the officers,
Mm-hmm.
the ideal being that, oh, you're turning command into orders, and orders are a resource you spend to tell the non-commissioned officers, I just manpower, go do stuff. The idea being that it's like, oh, hey, we're under attack, we need both military and manpower to solve this, or
Mm-hmm.
we're doing this research, but it really just needs a lot of bodies. So it both takes innovation, which is the second tier of like the science resource, and orders.
Right.
It'd be interesting if like those were something you could store, and then it's like, well, you cannot tell someone what to do unless you spend one of those. That would be an
Yes,
interesting twist.
I can see that. That would mean that a personal charisma could be a starting bonus or stat. Lack of personal charisma could be a disad too. And I've known officers like that, and they made it anyhow, but it was harder. Yeah, you could do something with that. Just making sure I'm looking at this side of the room once in a while because I'm largely focused on Alex. So they're in my field of vision. So you're not. So if you have to jump up and blow a whistle, that's okay.
So just at a high level, if you were approaching a game like this, and I'm not talking the specific design. You've lived with this for 5 minutes in your head. I had hours and hours and hours and hours to think about how it was going to work. But where would you start approaching that high level idea?
You mean the high level idea of the game or the high level idea of command as a resource?
I was thinking the game, but
The
if
game as a
if you
whole,
have
okay.
thoughts on command as a resource, that would also be something more
Well,
detailed. Would also be interesting to me.
I'd start by getting more familiar than I am with co-op games. It's not personally my thing, and so I play them only when I'm dragged into them. I'm not that hard to drag because any game is fun, but if it's my turn to choose, I'm probably going to choose a competitive. So I do my homework. It sounds like you're already there. So having done the homework, I would try to analyze not only what works and what doesn't, but also what's been beaten to death as a concept. And try to figure out why Pandemic, for instance, is a bigger seller than some other co-ops. Somebody give me a name. What's the firefighting game? I'm going blank. Nobody remembers. Okay, there's a co-op board game about fighting a fire that is really, really very engrossing. And every time I try to talk about it, I lose the title again. Sorry. That does raise the point. Did you have your components figured out, or were you trying to get the basic mechanics together and then support them with components?
The components in terms of, I assume you mean like cards and boards
Yes.
and pieces.
Things to play with.
I had an idea that I wanted it to be largely card based,
Okay.
and that is what I created. When I made the ship more detailed, it went from being like, oh, here are the various things on the ship, to like, here's a little map of the ship and you can move from one location to another, one tile to another.
Right. Where I was going with that was the other thing to look at when you look at co-ops in particular is how the components add to or detract from the theme, while in your case remaining legally distinct from everything that needs to be distinguished from. But you want to give, I mean, your important things here are you're a proto starship commander and your ship is in trouble and you might all die. I mean, that's the pull and the push there.
Yes.
And having thought about it a little bit more, I would encourage you to follow up on the idea of somebody's going to get promoted, maybe a couple of somebodies, but not everybody. Allowing for shared victories is nice for a couple of reasons, and one of them is that it makes a betrayal meaningful. If only one person can win no matter what, we all know that on some level the knives are out at the beginning. But if more than one person can win, then failing to help someone means something. It has weight in the game. Am I making sense?
You are to me.
Okay. How are we doing on time? It feels like just a little bit past the halfway point. I think I should let you ask any closing questions you've got, and then just turn it over to the audience for any general questions on game design that they might have thought they were going to be getting in this panel anyway. But I wanted to do one of these.
Yeah.
I like helping people with a new design.
I know earlier on when I was describing the idea and the first time I ran into that issue, you had mentioned that, while in Pandemic, people keep buying it and people keep liking it even with that problem.
Yes.
How do you get in the mindset when you're working on a game to just kind of look past well, this feels like it's wrong, this feels like it could be better, but does it actually matter?
That's a deep question. And it's a deep question, or I'm going to call it a deep question because I don't have a facile answer for it. It's what I do. And sometimes I'm like the blind Zen archer. If you interview him on how he keeps getting so close to the target, he can't tell you. He's just doing it. And one reason I like this kind of talk is it helps me illuminate to myself, what the heck am I doing? 50 years ago, I didn't think this was going to be my career. That's what it became. And I go through a certain amount of amazement and introspection every so often. Trying to give you an answer that would be somewhat useful. Talk to not just your players, but people who play co-op games. Why do they like co-ops? Do these problems bother them? Do they even recognize them as problems? Do they think that's the way it's supposed to be played? If you don't know something, ask people. Ask people who care about the answer.
All right.
Any closing questions for Alex? Yes.
It's more like the same thing. Like, I know some of my friends who like playing co-op games, they just like having a shot caller. Because some players just don't actually like to actively think; they just like to follow orders. So for them, where it's like someone just directs the game, some players just actually enjoy that because some players like maybe not know the rules, so they just like they'd rather have someone like tell them what to do, whereas they mess up and then something happens on the ship and then they're in trouble.
They want structured participation, is what you're saying, but not command. So, on the real legally distinct from the enterprise, they would be legally distinct from red shirts. I don't know where that takes us.
I think that is all the questions I have for you right now. Thank you for your time.
Well, thank you for yours. Thank you for having the stones to bring something new up in front of an audience and get it picked on. I hope you can go somewhere with it. Okay, I am up for general questions. I warn you that if it's a really interesting general question, I may take it and run in all directions. But really, tell me what you were hoping to get out of this talk and what more we can deliver in 23 minutes and 45 seconds. And if the answer is what I'd really like at this point is a break for the dealer room, that's legit too. Yes.
I was wondering if you would prefer to work with the theme first and then make it inform with game design, or other way around where you have a game design and then try to fit it in with a theme.
Right. That's a good one. And different designers have different opinions about it. James Ernest, for instance, always starts with a game mechanic, usually a very clever one, and puts a theme around it once he has the mechanic polished off. I'm almost always the other way around. I want to do a game about zombies or a game about dinosaurs, whatever. So I sort of interrogate myself. What is it about zombies? What's important about zombies? Well, they eat brains and they walk slow and so on and so on and so on. And eventually, I hope, some combination of characteristics is going to occur to me that will let me find some competition, some interaction, something that people can do. And then I try to turn that into a mechanic. If I fail, I try again until I give up. But like I say, I almost always start with a theme. Okay. Bueller? Anyone? Yes.
Whenever I'm working on a game or inside of a game system, whenever I'm trying to build something new, I always have just constant feature creep or complexity creep. Any suggestions for how to not constantly add new things when
it's so much fun to add new things?
Yeah.
That comes from loving game design. I mean, I'd rather make up a game than play one. Not by a lot, not so much that I can't play games, but it's my very favorite thing to do. And feature creep is very, it's real. Something that works for me, and this may get a laugh, but it's not a joke, is go take a shower. Just stand there and think about the game and think what ought to be thrown away. I mean, I don't know if it's the physical sensation of the water or the sound effect, but it creates a slightly meditative state. And often I can identify something where if we cut it out and threw it away, we would still have the core of the game. And then this gets back to wanting to work from the theme. What am I representing? So zombies are slow. Does that mean that they need a movement score? Maybe, but maybe it just means that all humans are faster than all zombies. And maybe that's enough. Just playtesting will help because you can see which of your finicky little details people stumble over and which ones they don't. But when I worked on Evil Stevie's pirate game, I wrote all kinds of unplayable rules. And the way I found out they were unplayable was trying to play them. I wrote a space game once that was so wonderful and detailed that the whole 40-person convention playtest bogged down on the first turn. That was embarrassing, but it happened. It told me that I was completely on the wrong track. And in fact, I've never gone anywhere else with that project at all. What I learned was that even at a game convention, no group of 40 people is going to walk in with enough interest and commitment to learn a number of pages of complicated rules. I mean, it could be a game about something not legally distinct from Star Trek at all, and William Shatner could be the GM, and it wouldn't matter. You're not going to find enough people for a complicated mass game. Make it simple, make it really simple, or give it a reasonable number of players. Okay, that was an example of one turning into a rant. Did I ever answer the question? Sort of? Okay. Well, if you want to try again, go for it. And if not, I'll look in other directions. Okay. I'm not going to make any efforts to stretch artificially. If we're done, then we're done. If you want to bring any thoughts up to me afterwards, I'll sit here for a minute just in case anyone does. But other than that, thank you for coming, and everyone is free to go without me looking at you funny. I appreciate the interest.